Interesting. Okay. Well, let's rock and roll. Yes. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Guy Podcast. This is episode number 44. My name's Al. I'm a music guy. I sing, I write songs, I make records, I play live shows, I play guitar, I teach, do a bunch of music stuff. Broadcasting to you from Liberty Village here in Toronto. My partner in crime. Coming at you from Whitby, Ontario. He's a songwriter, educator, guitarist, backup vocalist, recording person. Another music guy. It's Mr. Michael Hebbs.
What up? I sound so What up?
How's your week been?
I had a gig on the weekend. That was cool.
Sweet.
I have a gig this weekend.
Nice.
And I mean, bear in mind for those of you listening in the future, that there are no gigs now. So
yeah,
that's a rare thing for us at this point.
What gig did you play last weekend?
I don't know what it was called. It was in Barrie. It was a drive-in show, of course, and it was pretty good. Thought it was fine.
And this weekend, we're on the same thing this weekend, aren't we?
Yes, sir. You're doing sound.
I'm doing sound. Oh, yeah. I haven't got a chance to do sound in a while. We're playing for our good friend Chris Barclay, who...
Barks.
Hopefully we're going to get on this podcast at some point.
Some point. He'll make it.
Is that also a drive-in gig? I don't really actually know.
I don't know. You know what? Come to think of it, I'm actually kind of concerned because really the setup the other years was not drive-in gig like kosher. You know what I mean? There's no way to put cars where it was. So
yeah, I wonder if
better be a drive-in gig. Yeah,
I wonder if they're going to limit the attendance because I did a show last weekend at the London Music Hall with Genevieve Fisher, and it was a benefit for Beirut, Lebanon, for the disaster that happened there. And
what happened in Lebanon?
There was an explosion.
Oh yes,
yeah, a little bit ago at a factory, and did some serious damage over there. So they were having a benefit concert at London Music Hall, which is kind of like. Have you ever played there?
No.
It's a little bit like. I don't know. It's about the size of maybe the Opera House. Probably a little bit smaller than that. If we're thinking of a Toronto venue.
I have played there. Yeah.
But anyways, that's kind of the vibe. That's kind of the size of it. And they did like 50 tickets, I think, were sold. That was it. I'm sure the capacity is far, far greater than that. Like I bet you'd get a 300 to 500 people in there, maybe. I don't know what its max capacity is, but it's yeah. And so they had boxed off the areas and put like two chairs together and tape a box around them. And they were all separated. You had to wear masks at all times unless you were seated, or like even for us, we had to wear masks unless we were on stage or whatever.
Oh, okay, I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah. So
got a portable windscreen.
So that's ultimate pop filter. So that's one of the ways that shows are going down. And then I guess the other way is, the drive-in concert. So I played with Leah Daniels, Nicole Ray, Alessia Cole, and Bree Taylor. Did a 4-setter with the boys on for those 4 different artists last weekend at Harmonia Fest in Milton.
House band.
Yeah. Well, house band gig. And that was a drive-in show, so they didn't have, I don't know what they had at yours, but they didn't have a front of house PA at ours.
Yeah, I heard that they were doing the AM transmitter, which, I mean, if you had your window shut would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like mix, because I don't know, it'd be different. They had a PA at ours, and I was the first time that I've used direct in only live
Mm.
in like an outdoor thing, and like it was definitely different. It was a different, like, I almost feel like a lot of the fullness got lost just in the way that I mixed it. So that's a lesson for next time. But I feel like over AM, that wouldn't be the problem, you know? Because the mic would be right up there and it'd be in their car, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, if you trust your sound engineer for front of house,
Yes.
they can make your guitar sound solid, I would think. If it sounds good coming out of that box. It just feels weird because you're used to having an amp on stage. I'm sure it was fine.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think it was how I mixed it, though. You know, like I think there's a learning curve for sure. You know.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about before we started recording. I picked up the Michael Britt preset pack for the HX Stomp last week or the week before in preparation for this show, and it's dope, man. $20, like.
Yeah.
Just load it on there.
Seems like everybody just does that.
I guess so.
And then they get the Michael Britt.
Yeah, I just replace all the nonsense presets that are on there with like the crazy effects. Here's all the wacky stuff we could do with this thing.
Yeah.
And to just here's what it, your Vox, your Fender, your Mesa Boogie, and your Marshall, and like different sort of variations of those. And they sound dope, man. And there's some impulse responses that come with it. And then I was just able to copy the presets that I liked. There's a few that I don't really like, but that's going to happen with anything, right?
I wonder if on a different guitar that you'd like them, though.
That's the thing.
That's another thing as well.
Yeah.
People were complaining about that. They're like, oh, the Helix doesn't sound good on these patches. It's like, well, they're like, there's a bajillion guitars that you could be using it with.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and some of the presets that come with it are actually designed to go at the end of your pedal board. So he's actually worked out, here's some presets for folks that are still wanting to rock a pedal board into this thing, because a lot of people do that, especially with the Stomp, because it's super small and doesn't have a whole lot of functionality right on the face of it. With only the 3 buttons, but with the snapshots and stuff, have you used snapshots at all on that thing?
I was using Stomp mode, so like the difference between, to my knowledge, Stomp mode and snapshot mode. Stomp mode is like kind of like a pedal board. It's like an extra pedal board that you have, and you sort of have your row of like 6 pedals or whatever, and you can assign a few buttons to turn off and on those pedals. But Stomp mode is you can assign a button to do multiple things. But also, snapshot mode is you can assign a button to do multiple things. But also, you can do that with Stomp mode, so I don't know the difference. Like, because I set it up so, if I wanted a solo boost, I'd get more compression and I'd get more drive and volume. Like 3 separate things from one button, which I thought was really neat.
You could do the same things with both. It's just how you want to get there, but it's like, just imagine so you've got your basic tone, right? And your solo tone, you want to turn your volume up, add a compressor, and maybe like turn your reverb down or something, so the tone sounds like a little bit tighter. So you set all your settings that way, save that to snapshot 2, and now you can just flip between those. So it's a little bit faster than I found like assigning each button to multiple tasks and setting a bunch of parameters. It's just a little bit less menu diving. It's like, here's what I want it to look like when I'm soloing, save, and then you go back. And so I started using that for the first time, and I found it super helpful. And within those presets, they've already got snapshots pre-programmed and stuff. So I just copied from the presets that I liked and that sounded like closest to what I was going for that particular song. And then if I needed like a tremolo or an extra delay or something, I would just
put it on there.
I would put it on there at the expense of maybe a layer of distortion that I wasn't going to need, or like a reverb that I wasn't going to need or something. The problem is that there's not enough blocks sometimes to do like all the things you want to do, because the impulse response takes up an extra space So
See, that's the thing that bums me out because
yeah.
I'm rocking an analog compressor with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes up a space. The effects loop is what I run the analog compressor through,
Oh yeah.
and then the whatchamacallit will take up a space as well too. I mean, I kind of want to just I'm not going to sell my amp, but I was very tempted to just sell my amp, get the rack, and actually just always have a rack
Mm-hmm.
going, you know. But
Do it, man.
there's a benefit in keeping an amp as well too, you know. If I do a studio session and they're like, "Oh, bring an amp," I'd be like, "I don't have one. It's
Yeah,
not
but
gonna
they
be good
probably
for
have
me."
amps.
True.
How
This
many
is true.
most
This is true.
studios have amps?
But this is like a specialty amp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I feel like yeah, it's not worth having like a fucking Fender Deluxe at this point because everybody has them, but
Yeah.
nobody has a fucking Sir Badger.
It's
I just
true.
got new tubes in it actually, and
Yeah,
it
that
sounds way
I
different.
heard.
And
Yeah,
I don't know
Will
if
was
I
telling
like
me. Yeah.
But you know, these are the things that stress me out when you know I'm not playing gigs anyways. So
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Um. So I guess let's get into maybe our question of the week here, to kick things off. So we're taking a
how
question.
big is your penis? That's rude, Rich.
Yeah. Well, that I
Not
think
very
that's-
big is my answer.
Yeah, I was gonna say this might be a
Um,
question for you. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's um,
Mine would be how small. I think would be the way they would want
Yeah.
to start. Yeah, that one.
disappointing is the answer.
Right. Yeah. Not what you expected.
I mean, it's just
Not-
what you expect.
Not what you were hoping for.
You have a horrible opinion of me.
So we take questions every week. We want to take your questions. So send us questions at musicguypodcast@gmail.com or on our Facebook page, or connect with us on social media on Instagram and DM us or whatever. However you want to get in touch with us, ask a question. We would love to feature it on the show. And yeah, our question this week is actually one we missed from our Q&A episode last week. This is from Rich De Silva, friend of the show, great drummer, great musician, producer, who's actually the producer for the podcast Big Moves Podcast, hosted
yes.
by our friend Devin Potter, who was on the show a few episodes back for us anyways.
I feel like if I was on that show, because it's all about like moving to a place and right, like making a change in that sense.
Yeah, like moving to a new country or a new province or whatever. Yeah.
I couldn't even like contribute anything that way, but even in like life, I don't make any big moves in life. It's just very slow. My career progression is just like
Yeah. Big ships turn slow, man.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I'm fucking hoping to be a big ship.
I
with a
mean,
small dick.
I think we small anchor. I think we all have like pretty good travel stories though, as you know, musicians
Oh,
on the
yeah,
road.
yeah.
But yeah, I've never, relocated from the Toronto area to anywhere else in a big way. But anyways, the podcast is dope. If folks are listening for a new podcast, I've checked out the first episode and I really enjoyed it. So they're short, they're very well paced. Not like ours where we just ramble on the whole time.
Yeah,
And,
it's clearly very intentional.
And Devin, in her super organized fashion, is super organized, and then it's a great show as a result. It's got a good flow to it, and it's fun to listen to. So check out the Big Moves Podcast, produced by our friend Rich De Silva, who asks, "What?" Now I don't have the question in front of me. See, this is what I'm talking about here.
Yeah,
This is what I'm
why
talking about.
we're both unsuccessful people.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. What is your method for learning songs quickly? Go.
Good question.
As quickly as you can.
As quick as I can. So for me, learning songs quickly is all about it depends. There's two situations. Learning songs quickly, like easily, I have to have tons of time. So if I can listen in the car and just kind of like have it on in the background and all that shit, and I don't actually have to actively do anything, I can learn it super quick. You know, I can listen to the car. If I get a set list 2 weeks before, have all the things on a playlist, each time I'm in the car, I'll listen to it. And then when I go to learn the song, it's like I play through it once or twice.
Right.
But that's not always the case. If I get a set list, 4 days before rehearsal, or, I don't know, just like a set list for a big set list, learning songs quick, I don't really have a way. I'm not a very quick tune learner. So tell me what you got.
Well, that's
Depends
interesting.
on, like, lead lines and shit.
Yeah,
How do you
lead
learn lead
lines
lines quickly?
are that is tough. It's interesting that you're talking about like not so much like super quickly learning songs, but time management, like time efficiency. Like we spend hours and hours in the car when we're gigging, driving from place to place. Have that playlist made ahead of time and start internalizing how the song goes. So, I mean, if we're talking about country and pop songs, which I think is what we're talking about, because if we're talking about prog, metal tunes or like classical songs or whatever, that's not something that's going to come quickly. But if we're talking about pop and country kind of stuff, then number one is for us, harmonic players, not percussionists and drummers. It's got to be your Nashville numbers, man. You got to have those figured out, right? And so we're talking about in your diatonic sort of major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Each one of those gets a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1 again. And then each one of those numbers has a chord that goes with it. And without getting too deep into all this theory stuff, there's lots of sort of resources for this online. If you can recognize, which chords are happening at what time, and as you play more songs, your ear will get more effective at doing that, then it gets real easy to pick up songs quickly. And then because most songs in pop and country repeat sections quite a bit, like usually the verse is going to be a single chord progression repeated bar after bar after bar, like 1 4 5 or just 1 4 maybe, or whatever, 6 4 1 5, or these are all common sort of chord progressions. Then you can start to pick those up quickly. So if you have your Nashville numbers figured out, that's sort of step one. And then for me, it's actually like active listening. I need to be focused, not even necessarily have my instrument in my hands, but also not be driving, not be whatever. This is just personally for me. Like I need to be at home in a quiet environment, and I need to close my eyes and listen through the song and really force myself to not start immediately playing over it, because that's when I miss details. So like actually actively listening and sort of figuring out what is going on. And then after I've done that a couple of times, I should have the chord progression of the song mapped out in my head. So then I'll go through it once or twice with the guitar, depending on how difficult and complex it is. And then once I feel like I've got that down, I go to the background vocals. And for me, because I sing so much backups, I find that helps tie together the song for me and keep me grounded to the song and not get as confused song to song, where it's like, oh, is that 145 or 451 or 64? Because a lot of songs just become kind of the same, but just in different keys or whatever, and there's similar tempos and similar grooves and stuff, and it can get confusing if you're thinking in numbers. So I find the singing backups helps me with that. If you're not a backup singer yourself, you could just sort of at least sing along with some of the lyrics off mic. Looks good on stage too, when like players are kind of singing along. So you'll see people do that, but it's also a great way to just remember how the song goes. And you could even be kind of secretly practicing a harmony part or something too, and to get that kind of going, even if you're not one of the players in the band.
The
that's
next thing that they hopefully call you for.
Yeah, even if you're not like expected to do that kind of stuff, that could be like a way for you to remember how the song goes and develop that muscle a little bit.
One of the things, this is all for like low resolution stuff.
Yeah.
Lowish, right? Except for lyrics. To be honest, I can't memorize lyrics to save my life. With backups, do you sometimes, not like you get most of the lyrics, and then certain words you mess up, but they're close enough that no one's gonna tell, or
Yeah, I
I'm talking
mean,
about this is late notice, like you have to learn a boatload of tunes.
we've talked about this before. It's all about expectations, and if you get the set list the day before, then there are certain expectations that I think are unreasonable for people to have of you. Like, are you going to catch every single harmony? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right? But as a guy who sings a lot of backups, I mean, one thing that you should look to do is actually articulate less when you're singing backups. It's like pronunciation becomes far less important when you're singing backups, because even if you have the lyrics correct, your T's and your hard C's and like consonants are going to sort of flam against the lead singers, even if you have the words right, because you don't know exactly how they're going to, if this is a band you've rehearsed once and the show's tomorrow, or, you know what I mean? Or like you didn't rehearse at all. Like we didn't get a chance to rehearse before the Harmonia Festival. Is just too complicated right now with the social distancing and stuff. It's like it's too hard to get people in a room in a safe way and whatever. So it was just like, I know what the lyrics are, but I'm going to say words kind of softly in a consonant sense, so that I don't. And then, if I mess up a lyric, it's like I can kind of just flub into the right word. Whereas if I'm like really hard pronunciating everything, it's going to be really obvious if I mess up a lyric. I'm trying to blend with the lead singer. I'm not trying to. Yeah. So, I think softening your S's, your T's, your C's and K's and P's and all that stuff is a nice thing to do anyways. And it helps with that for sure.
Nice touch.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I mean, that's the high resolution stuff's a whole different ball game. I feel like that's time in.
You just have to.
I have a method of charting that I like for lead players. Mm-hmm. So I use it's not mono width. That's not a thing. Oh gosh, it's a fixed width font. Courier font or whatever. The issue is if you're writing beneath stuff, if they're like shots and you don't want to write like physical sheet music, I write like the count, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I just write where the chords fit into that. And then for melodies, if I know the gist of the melody, or if I get the first 2 notes and then I'll know it, then what I'll do is I'll write out physical numbers. So I write Roman numerals for the chords, which I know a lot of people don't do. They write numbers for the chords. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I write Roman numerals for the chords because I kind of learned music theory in a classical way. I like self-taught it because I didn't have anybody to teach it to me.
Yeah.
I do Roman numerals for the chords. And then for the melodies, I do numbers. And if it's above, like, so say, for instance, if the melody starts, on the 5 below the 1, I'll do -5 going up to 1. And then if it's ascending, I'll keep going 1, 2, 3. And that sort of idea, like that sort of gets me by most of the time. But if it's a really hard melody and I have to do charts, I'll actually write a piece. I'll write music on like something like MuseScore. MuseScore is like a free version of Sibelius, pretty much. I'll screenshot that and then I'll edit that into the chart. So the chart is mostly a text document, but it has a picture thing as well. And then that way I'm not using, Sibelius for the whole thing or MuseScore just because it's a pain in the ass to program all that shit in.
I just find it.
How long does it take you to write out a chart?
I don't chart.
Yeah, you were saying you don't.
I just don't. I find it so cumbersome. I hate charting. I hate reading charts. I mean, I'll do it. Like, if I have to write a chart, my go-to app now is OneChart, the number 1, and chart for the iPad.
That's for Apple things, right?
Yeah, I have an iPad, and I've had to use it for certain things, and it's really great because you can, if everybody's using it, then you can sort of send charts to each other and whatever. And it's really clean and laid out really well. But so I find that useful for discrepancies. So, for example, when we were learning like 4 sets of music for this festival last weekend, as I'm going through the tunes, if there's a a moment where it's like, that sounds like a 5 chord. It sounds like the bass is playing a 3 underneath it, though, on the record. And like, is it supposed to be 3 minor? One instrument on the record sounds like it might be playing 3 minor, and the other sounds like it might be playing 5. And then it's just like, okay, I'm gonna look at Mark's chart that he sent, and if he's playing a 3, then I have to decide, like, am I gonna go with the 5, which is probably gonna sound weird live, or do I just play the 3 minor or whatever, and then make a decision. So I find it useful for that, but I hate reading, and I hate, like, I just find I lose my connection to the song. So
yeah, it's a bummer when I have to, but it's like I don't learn songs quick. Oddly enough, though, so I've played with this one guy a few times. He does like the Nashville thing, and he doesn't send a set list. Just calls tunes and you follow along.
Yeah, that's a very jammy
I
gig.
actually do better on that than short notice for gigs.
Well, because because you're in the fire, and your instincts are, you got to trust yourself. You got to trust your ears. What drives me nuts, and I'm sure I've talked about this before, is when you're on a gig and people are reading charts and somebody plays a wrong note, and they just look at everybody like, what? I'm reading the chart. This is what it says on my chart. And it's like, yeah, but like, you're not paying attention to what's going on. Like maybe the singer dropped a bar or something, and we have to move on to the next section. It's like, you got to keep your head up, man. Like, it's not about, and so, I mean, that kind of drives me bonkers. And then also it's like, just if I'm reading a chart and I get lost or something, or I like miss a line, and then I start freaking out. It's like, I don't know where I am. It's like, just use your ears. I find it more helpful. And I've talked about this before, but it's like like information bottleneck, or like compartmentalization of information, where if I've learned the song and the whole song is 1-4-5, except for the pre-chorus goes to 2.
Yeah, the green light, red light.
Yeah, the green light, red light kind of thing. And I still don't have a great way of explaining this, but I heard somebody talking about a information bottleneck. What am I trying to say? Concept. The concept of an information bottleneck. This is actually on a Magic podcast, but anyways, different kind of thing. But
Magic's a card game. You're not a fucking close-up magician.
No, God, no. No. So
I love that. That's a god no. No, I play card games. Yeah. I don't.
No, I'm not good with sleight of hand.
I agree with you that it's worse to be a fucking magician than it is to play fucking card games.
Well, I mean, magicians are super cool, but that'd be a tough gig. I
feel like that's not true.
Have you ever been to a live magic show? Like have you ever seen a
they're cool when they're doing a magic show. Yeah. But other than that, they're not.
Sure.
As people.
I mean, neither am I. Like,
true that. Oh, I'm not saying I'm cool.
Yeah, musicians are so cool. I was like, no, we're not.
Statistically, Yeah.
But anyway, so information bottleneck, like, so if the whole song is 1-4-5, and it goes to a 2 in the pre-chorus, then the only thing I have to remember is that it goes to a 2 in the pre-chorus. Does that make sense? Like, once enough, if enough stuff is the same, then you just catalog that in your brain as like, okay, the whole thing is
to do that. Yeah.
Except for this. And then the only thing I have to remember is that. So it
takes a leap of faith for me.
Yeah, it does. And there's a little bit of an instinctual element too. It's like, this is where the red light, green light thing comes in. Yeah. It's like, I can feel, this is kind of sounds weird, but like I can feel as I'm learning the tunes, I develop, because I'm not reading a chart, I develop that feeling of like, okay, the part where something unusual is going to happen is coming up, right? So as I'm learning the songs, I'm training myself to just remember that. And then pre-chorus hits and it's like, oh, I missed it this time. Okay, I got to remember. Next time, that's where that thing happens. Okay, next time. Okay, I got it this time. Next time. Okay, now I know it's here. And now I've developed that memory of like, here comes that weird part. And then, so now I've learned the song, but now I'm not looking at a chart. I don't know if that makes sense, but that
makes perfect sense. I mean, I should be doing that because I get stressed. for me, learning a set list is definitely a stressful endeavor.
Oh, it is for me too. I'm not saying this stuff is super easy, but
I think that'll ease it a little bit, though. It's
yeah.
like, Mike, you know what you're doing. Like, the fact that I can do that gig where there's no set list and, like, fucking nail it. And, like, I don't have to look at his hands or anything. You know what I mean? Like, I just sort of follow along by ear. And there was one time that he didn't have a bass player. So I was the only harmonic instrument.
Really?
It was just guitar, bass, and drums. And I just had to like make up lead lines for the hooks, and then I just had to play chords. And
wait a minute, so there was no bass? You just said there was bass.
There was there was no bass. He played bass.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a talented dude.
Nice. The one more thing I'll say to this is that something we tried for the first time that worked really, really well this show, in particular because we couldn't rehearse and there was so much material, was I made spreadsheets for each artist, and so it would have their set list in the left hand side column, right? So song 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and then next to each one of those songs, I'd list myself, Mark, and Will, and then on the top bar would be sort of the timeline of the song. So like verse 1. Pre-chorus 1, chorus 1,
cool,
verse
cool.
2, pre-2, chorus 2, etc. until the end of the song. And then if there was a harmony part in one of those sections, it just became my job to like say who's going to sing what.
Assign,
I'll take the mid, Mark takes the low was like often what I did. And then I would go into each, I would just record a little snippet of like me singing that harmony part.
Wow.
Okay, and then so I'd have these little snippets, and this took a bunch of time, but because we couldn't rehearse,
if you don't have the time, then don't do it. But even the spreadsheet, that's a great idea.
And then it helped me A, to learn the part myself, and then B, because it's good practice, right? Just to figure out what the harmony was. I had to do that anyways, but then like committing it to a little recording snippet makes me learn it better, right? And then B, Mark or Will or whoever, when they can look at this sheet, and I had it all linked to files in a Drive folder, so they could just click on the here you are, you're singing the mid part in chorus 1, click, it opens a little file of me just being like singing however well or not, just like here's what the notes are, here's what the part is. It's like wasn't a perfectionist kind of thing, but
it's a good way to coordinate.
Yeah, because then there's no question about like who's doing what, right? So if you have somebody in your band who you trust to sort of direct that side of it, it made things very efficient for us. There was no, and if you can do a little recording of each harmony, then
that you're doing,
there's no,
or that
everybody's doing. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
wow.
I
feel like that's like high resolution. We got lots of time. Not that these gigs, that it's like that's a good idea. It's just obviously. I mean, that's if you're almost like the band leader.
Yeah, I mean, well, Mark. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the way we worked together on this one was that Mark took charge of just making sure there was a chart for every song, so that if there was discrepancies, I would look to that and be like, okay, this is what we're doing. It sounds like it might go here, but we're gonna do this.
Sure.
Make sure we're all playing the same thing. And then my job was make sure that we know what everybody's singing backup wise. Because, I'm going to take most of the harmonies, but if there's a 3-part, here's what it is.
Sure.
Or whatever. If there's a gang, here's what it is. So compartmentalizing that out rather than everybody sort of doing work on their own and then coming together on the day of the gig and being like, here's what, you know what I mean? Communication,
90% of the time it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But that 10% of the show, there's going to be like little things like, ooh.
Yeah.
That came up. That's probably a good idea for a house band situation too. Because how often are you going to be playing with multiple bands? That's more like a band leader thing, or it's like, me and these 4 guys were the house band. Somebody needs to take the reins.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. I mean, so hopefully that answers Rich's question.
Yeah, that was a kind of a deep dive there, but it was good. It was good
like
work.
A 30-minute dive.
The other thing that we want to do here is play people's music on the show. If you have a song that's released or not or whatever, and it's yours, and you want us to maybe review the song a little bit and give you some exposure and play the song, send us. It could be an MP3, it could be a SoundCloud link, it could be a Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever, to musicguypodcast.com. Or, again, connect with us on social media, let us know. And we'll listen to the tune. If we like it, which we probably will because we like music, then we'll play it on the show and give you a shout out. So definitely do that if you want us to play your tune. We would love to play it. And with that, I guess, yeah, let's get into the main topic. We've already been rolling for a minute here, but we'll do this. Now, you know what I'm thinking is, how am I going to get Pro Tools open without losing? Like, there's no way I can do this without losing the recording. So we'll just have we'll just have to talk through it. Yeah, I was going to say, because I'm already using Pro Tools to record. But anyways, so let's talk. I just want to do a little bit of an update on the 10-step mix, which we talked about 34 episodes ago. It's almost a year ago that we did this. And basically what we did at that point is I made a video series of 10 videos to sort of show the mixing process of a song, sort of the way I was doing it, and break it down into 10 steps that were sort of easy to follow and give like a good workflow to myself and hopefully others who were looking for like a little bit of guidance in their mixing.
These are like the steps that you're doing them in a particular order, but these are the steps that are taken to mix a song.
Yeah.
So it's like, it applies to not just mixers or people who want to mix, but like people who want to understand better what's going on, what they're paying for.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it as well, too. It's like, yeah, here's what goes on and how much is involved, but also how you can organize the process in a way just to make it a little bit more feasible. Because if you just open up a session, you just start moving faders around and slapping plugins on things, you can get lost real fast. And
it's inconsistent too.
Yeah, and I've been there. I'm sure a lot of us have. And I just find that as I developed my workflow, I was getting things done more quickly, more consistently, not getting lost as much, still getting lost quite often, but not as much. And just sort of getting to results that I found I enjoyed and the people that I was working for enjoyed a little bit quicker, a little bit more easily. So anyways, and I've got like a process that I trust to a certain degree. So if I feel like I'm really veering away from that on a project and being like, oh, well, I'm EQing this like this because of this, and then I'm like compressing the heck out of this because of this, and it's just like, hold on a second. Like, we're getting a little too far away from what works. And maybe let's just, take a break, come back to it, and maybe see if we can get back to sort of what's working, because we're kind of veering off here. So, just not completely clawing away at something in the dark. So yeah, let's jump into it. Let's go over it, and I'll sort of explain what plugins I've been using for people who are interested in that kind of stuff. And this is for mixing like a rock track or a pop or a country kind of song, generally speaking.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure the same things apply between, like, not the same exact things, but like the same idea. You're EQing something to clean it up, or you're EQing it to enhance it, or make it stand out more, something of that nature.
Yeah, I think the overall process is going to work for most styles of music. It's specifically how you're processing different instruments is going to change stylistically speaking and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so these are all videos you can find on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/musicguypodcast. If you want to check them out, I think there's still great videos to watch, but just to sort of give people an introduction to this if they haven't heard that previous episode or seen the videos, and also just a little bit of an update of what I'm doing now. So step one, import the template. And this is something that I wasn't doing until about a year ago, and this just changed everything for me in terms of workflow on Pro Tools. So when we're talking about a template, this is the way that I look at a template is that this is the most recent thing I've mixed. So I make a new session and I import the settings and the data from the previous session. So if I've got a session with, some instrument tracks that have been edited and recorded and some vocals that have been edited and tuned and all that stuff's ready to go. We're ready to mix. I will literally just import, it's called import session data on Pro Tools from the previous session and match each track. So the kick drum from that session is going to go to the kick drum of this session, and guitars are going to go to guitars, and it might not match up perfectly.
Things that you do to it, right? Like all the plugins and adjustments you've made sort of come with it.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm not replacing the audio. The audio is what we've recorded for this current song or whatever. But yeah, exactly. All the plugin settings and even the volume settings, the sends, what's going to reverb, what's going to whatever, and roughly how loud everything's going to be. That all comes in. Okay. And then if I'm starting right from scratch, or if I may mute a lot of those plugins once they've been brought in.
Yeah.
But just to get a start here from scratch. But having those plugins there already saves a bunch of time in terms of menu diving and like trying to remember what we did on the last song or whatever. It's like, here they all are.
Oh, yeah.
I can bypass them all just to start, because we're going to get into the next couple steps here where we're just going to get a rough balance. But then as I bring those plugins in, I don't need to click through a bunch of menus, right?
Yeah. So once again, it makes you more consistent,
Oh, yeah.
You're starting the exact same way every time. You're like, your home base is the same plugins and adjustments, but it's like, oh, I'm still going to like mix the song for the song, but I just know what I did before.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a criticism of this might be like, oh, well, all your mixes are going to sound the same because you're always using the same, plugins or whatever. But it's like, yeah, I use the same guitar to play like every song I play. Not every song I play sounds the same. You know what I mean? Like, so there's just certain plugins that work for certain instruments, and I think that in watching a lot of top mixers do their thing on, different videos and like mix with the masters and stuff like that, guys have their go-to gear or plugins for different purposes. People say, oh, this mic
Especially
always sounds good on this
gear.
and and this plugin I always use this for this and stuff. So I think I think what seems like a great idea is like, oh yeah, well, we'll just start fresh and we'll just see what sounds good and we'll just start pulling stuff in. Actually takes a ton of time and can, for me anyways, end up with me just getting lost. Whereas if I just pull in what we had on the last track, that worked. It's a great starting point, Well,
also too, you I think you mentioned in the videos, is it objectivity?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you lose it the more you listen. So it's like the more time you spend putting in all this stuff, the more objectivity you lose. And just you're listening to it and you get used to how it sounds and you're like, oh yeah, this sounds good because you've listened to it like 20 times. But it's like, no, like your thing before could have sounded better.
That's a great point.
It helps maintain it.
No, you're absolutely right, man. And like, if the longer it takes you to do things, the less objectivity you have. You're absolutely right. You lose that, right? And even time spent not listening to the song and like diving into a menu for a plugin. Like if it takes me 20 to 30 seconds to find a plugin and then maybe another 30 seconds to like kind of turn the knobs the way I want, and then like I'm listening to like a soloed kick drum or something, I'm losing that objectivity, that perspective on the rest of the song. Whereas like if you as much as possible can listen to all the tracks at the same time and not solo a ton, then you can hear, okay, the kick drum needs a little bit more thump and attack. It's like, I've already got the plugins on there. The song's playing. I don't need to pause the song to look for a plugin. Like I can just I can just turn this plugin on. Okay, that's kind of doing what I want. All right, maybe I'll just add a little bit more top end, but that's pretty much it. Okay, now we're done. That took 10 seconds, as opposed to a minute and a half searching through a vast menu of things for the right,
and times
EQ.
that by 40 plugins or whatever, and that's sizable amount of time and objectivity you're losing.
Exactly. Yeah. So templates. So if you watch the first video of the 10-set mix, you'll see how I do that. I don't actually use the Pro Tools template file because those just always are buggy for me and weird. I'll just
Really?
Yeah, they don't work sometimes. And plus, like, it's a living, evolving document, right? Song to song.
Sure.
Like I don't want to have to go back to my template file and update that for every mix I do.
Yeah,
Let's just pull in the stuff we used last time. Maybe I changed compressors on something. I'm gonna want to
also you may have like a template, 10 years from now, you may be like, oh, I mixed a song that was kind of similar to this and I had a good sound, so I'm just going to pull up that song and drag it in,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If there's like a hard rock song we did from, a couple years ago, and it's like, I'm not going to maybe use those settings on the next country record, but the next, you're right. The next song of similar genre, just file that stuff in. It's super easy. So, use templates. They're the best. And then honestly from there, like with a few minor adjustments, you could get pretty close to a done mix. But I think there is some value in bringing in those plugins, bypassing them or disabling them, and just getting the faders in a good spot. So just listen to all the tracks together and just start sort of moving faders up and down until you've got what we would call a rough balance, where you can sort of hear everything. You pan things to one side or another, and just like, here's sort of we're roughing it in. Here's sort of something that sounds acceptable to me without using any plugins or any automation at all. Just get the song to that point that, hopefully will only take 1 or 2 listens through the song. So again, this is all about time efficiency, right?
Yeah.
We're not jumping.
Also not leading you down the wrong path. Right?
Yeah.
I feel like if the guitar is recorded a certain way and you're like, you want to hear it a certain way that's like polar opposite to the way that it's recorded or the guitar that they're using, I find myself EQing things like way too drastically. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know if that's necessarily the move.
Well, it's all about,
like, UBK always says, make it sound as good as you can with just fucking faders.
Yeah. Because you need that context, right? As soon as you hit the solo button, you have no idea what the purpose of this element is anymore, right? You need to be listening to it in conjunction with the other elements that are going to be playing. Nobody is ever going to hear that track in solo unless it's 40 years later and the song was a huge hit and like somebody takes the stems and puts them on YouTube and like whatever. But nobody's ever going to hear that, right? So you need to be listening in context. So we're always trying to maintain efficiency of time and objectivity, just like you said, Mike. Like, we're listening to all the tracks at the same time, get a rough balance with the faders, just make it sound acceptable. And that's step 2. So a couple listens through the song, just push some faders in different directions, get it sounding kind of reasonable, and then move to step 3, which is the mix bus processing. So on your digital audio workstation, be it Pro Tools or Cubase or Reaper or Ableton or whatever, you should be able to send all the tracks in your mix to one singular stereo aux channel. And so you're gonna instead of having each track individually coming out your speakers, they're all gonna go to this one 2-channel stereo aux track, and that'll send to your speakers. And then what you can do is actually put processing on that aux channel, and that's going to be called the mix bus. That's what we call the mix bus. And so we can apply a little bit of compression to that. We can apply a little bit of light distortion or like sonic enhancement. So I've been using the SSL bus compressor. That's a pretty classic choice for the mix bus, where it's just touching the track, like maybe reducing, compressing like by a dB on the loudest hits, 1 to 2 dBs. Very light, very transparent, very slow attack, fast release, kind of just like you don't notice that it's there too much. It just kind of hugs things and ties the track together a little bit. I've been using the Oxford inflator.
Yeah, you were talking about. So the Oxford inflator, is it like an enhancer or?
Yeah, kind of. That's what they call it, like a sonic enhancer. It's like a secret sauce kind of plug-in.
Yeah. You know what I kind of equate that stuff to? It's the same as when guys are like, I run my rig through this and I don't even do anything. Like I can't even tell what it's doing, but it just adds. I like what it does.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is the guitar version of this.
Yeah.
So there's a guitarist named Brent Mason, amazing country guitarist, but he's not like, I don't think he overthinks things, I'm not saying he's stupid, but I don't think he overthinks things. So
Right.
he has an EP booster.
EP booster, yeah, great example.
I heard him talking about it when it was in his rig. He's like, I don't even know what this does, but I just always leave it on.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even turn the volume up. He just leaves it, at 0 and
Just
turns
in
it
the
on,
chain,
just running
yeah.
it through it.
Because
Yeah,
didn't
just
that
makes it
come from
sound
Van Halen? He
good.
had
He did that with the phaser.
Right. But he
And
didn't
it's
turn
like,
the phaser on. It was just,
Yeah.
he just wanted it in his pedal board because it gave a little extra juice or something. Isn't that literally where
I
the
think
EP
what
booster
it
came from?
was a sound engineer would have heard the phaser, but your
Okay.
average like person, it was so slow and so like minimal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That it like just added something to his tone.
Right. So, yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah. So, actually, I saw a video with Tom Lord Alge, CLA's brother, where he put a slow phaser on a live recording on the mix bus. Like you're saying, it'd be like the cycle of the phase was very it was very minimal, but it took like 30 seconds or something to actually get all the way around the phase cycle. So you didn't really know that it was happening, but it was adding some kind of interesting motion to the track. It was a really cool
So
effect.
interesting. That sort of stuff is so cool.
And so stuff like that's going on all the time. So anyways, yeah, the Oxford inflator, it's one of those plugins where it's like, is this just making things louder? Is it actually doing anything? I don't know. I spent like $300 on it, so hopefully it's but it's one of those things where
$300 more expensive.
you put it on your track and it just makes it sound better. So I use that, and then you'll use maybe like a limiter, like an L1 or an L2 from Waves, just to make it loud, so that when you send it to the client, they're not like, why is this so quiet? And then you'll usually take that off in mastering. But if you really like what it's doing to the track and it's not compressing it too much, you can actually send it to mastering with the limiter on. I've done that too. Because mastering engineers have that like extra secret sauce, or they can get even more headroom, and a lot of them don't even care if you've got a limiter on your track, as long as it's not
They got a better room,
smashing
better
it.
speakers,
But yeah.
crazy expensive gear, better ears.
Yes. So usually you
So they're
take the
gonna do
limiter
some
off,
fucking
but I will leave on the compression and the enhancer. And one other thing I'll do is I'll roll off like 40 hertz of low end, and like the very, very top end, like 20K, I'll do a little high or a low pass at 20K on an EQ just to save headroom there, because those are frequencies that you're not hearing on either side. So to get, unless you're like, if you've got like a super, super low like bass synth or something, you don't want it to be like rumbling people's cars. So you can just roll off that super, super low stuff. So that's mix bus. And then I jump to lead vocals. So this is where the biggest sort of revelation came for me. And I don't remember why I started doing this, but usually...
It's because you're a vocalist.
Maybe. Usually a lot of people start with the kick drum, right? Jump to the kick drum. Let's solo it up. Let's make the kick drum sound slamming, right? And I flipped it around for some reason, and I've liked it a lot better this way. I start with the lead vocal. Lead vocal is the most important element of any song. So why not start there and make the rest of the instruments complement that? That's my theory.
Fair.
It's been working. I find that I've just been getting mixes done faster, and they sound better when I start this way. So I've already got plugins on the vocal from the template, so now all I have to do is enable them, right? And I've usually got, it usually starts with an EQ that's reducing the build-up frequencies. So there's usually a frequency somewhere in between like 150 and 200 hertz-ish, where you'll sort of, there'll be some, if you turn it up, right?
Yeah.
If you squish the Q in as tight as you can go and turn it up and move it around, you'll start hearing that, and you find the one that's sort of the most egregious. I just bring it down usually by a dB and then flatten the Q back out so it's nice and gentle. Just reducing natural? Just a little more natural, just reducing a little bit of womp and whatever. And then there's usually a build-up frequency between 2 and 300, and then one between maybe 3 and 400. So I'll just gently reduce those. And then depending on, this is maybe a thing I didn't have in the original, but depending on the singer's voice, I found that cutting around 600 to 700 works well, at least for my own voice. I've got a build up there, and so you got to find sort of each individual vocalist where they've got build up. And if you're recording from home, you're going to have more of these build up frequencies because at studios, they've got better treated rooms and better gear, and they may have already done some of this EQ in the first place.
Yep.
So you may not need as much of it if your tracks came from a sweet studio, but if they didn't, you might have to get a little bit more aggressive with some of these build-up frequencies. Kind of heuristic for this, for me, is the more you're cutting, the more you're reducing those frequencies, the tighter the Q should be, right? The tighter the width of that cut.
Yeah.
So if I'm cutting
6
dB, I'm going to tighten up that Q so that I'm not affecting the surrounding frequencies as much. Obviously, you got to do what sounds the best, but generally speaking, the bigger of a cut you're going to make, and I think this works for any instrument really, the bigger the cut goes, the tighter the bandwidth of that cut should be.
When do you decide to do something like a notch where you're like really, really like narrow Q and you cut out a ton? When is that like versus like, oh, you know, like, is it something, if it really stands out and you don't even need to sweep around for it, you're like, okay, I'm gonna fucking just really
I mean, sometimes there's situations where there was a room irregularity where you could just hear like in the room the whole time, you know, then you search for that and try to cut that out. It can be really tough to remove that stuff. But where I'll do the tightest, deepest cuts is on drums.
Okay.
Because drums don't change pitch, generally speaking, unless we're talking about like a timpani. So that if you find that build-up frequency in the kick drum, it's always going to be there. Whereas in a vocalist, you know, the build-up range is going to be a little bit more broad because they're going to move through different notes. So I'll do a gentle cut, try not to disrupt the tone of the voice too much. But on like a kick drum, if I find like a woom, woom, woom at like 350 or whatever, I'm just going to jam that pretty far down.
That's smart.
So, yeah, that's sort of, or like cymbals, overheads, you know, 4K, 4.5K, just find where it's just like, and just get that out of here. It's the worst, you know. But, so that's where I do that. I mean, it's not the only way to do it, and I'm sure there's people who do things differently who are better than me, but that's what I do. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, so reducing those sort of build-up frequencies of the vocals, and then I'll put the flavor EQ on after that. So that'll be like an SSL channel strip. And I just pull up the lead vocal preset and kind of just go from there. If it's adding too much low end, I'll take that out. But usually it's just adding some top and maybe some like
Yeah, I was about to
presence.
ask, yeah.
Like
Yeah,
so it'll
yeah.
add some like 8K and some like 4K
so
or whatever. 3.5K.
The bottom brings the fullness.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you would say? And then like the top brings almost like the clarity, like the
Yeah, and
or the
the clarity
expensiveness.
and maybe some edge to the sound too. Yeah. So I've been experimenting lately with adding more like 3 and 4K to the vocal just to get it to really be upfront and in your face. You can't add frequencies like that to too many different instruments, otherwise it just becomes very fatiguing to listen to. But for a vocal, I think you can do it.
So explain to me ear fatigue, because I'm sure I've experienced it, but I don't consciously go like, "Ooh, my ears are tired."
Oh man, well, I mean, you've been to a concert before and like,
It hurts.
yeah.
Sure, yeah.
I mean,
But I never get that from mixing or listening to like
oh
stuff,
really?
like my guitar. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, for my understanding, there's like a built-in EQ curve, if you will, to like the human ear. Okay.
Yeah.
So, in evolutionary terms, it's more important for us to hear 3K than, I don't know, like 300 hertz, for example.
Sure.
Because if we're trying to avoid predators, we need to hear like the sound of a twig snapping underfoot or something, right? Like if you ever go for a hike and you step, you hear a rustling in the woods or something, you're like, holy shit, is that a bear or something? It's like that rustling, that sound of like something snapping, it's like that is all that pins right into your brain, right? So those frequencies, and like an actual audiologist could tell you what they are, but those, I guess what you'd say like upper mid frequencies, like 1K, 2K, 3K, 4K, 5K area are like hyped. They hit our ears harder because we're more sensitive to them. So if you have a piece of material or like a guitar tone or a mix or whatever with a lot of those frequencies boosted in it, that will fatigue your ear and become like difficult to listen to. So you have to be selective with where you're going to use those, because they do a lot.
Bit of science behind this.
Yeah, they do a lot. So
nonsense.
When you boost 3K in a signal, you're really going to notice that you did that. So be aware of that. But anyway, so then a little bit of EQ boosting on that SSL lead vocal preset. I like to use presets, man. Somebody else put in the time. I'm just gonna pop it in and reap the benefits.
Also, you can figure out what they're doing. It's like, oh, well, why are they adding 3K? It's like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Like, whereas you don't have to start from scratch and just be like, well, what do I think I should add here?
Yeah, exactly. So little bit of that, and then there'll be a little bit of compression on there too, because why not? And then on to the next plugins, which are de-essers. So we boosted some top end to give some air and some presence and stuff. Now you're gonna get this coming in super hot, especially if your singer is not self-aware about how loud their S's are, or whatever. If they're really going for it, they're really gonna be pushing air. So you're gonna get those S's. So I'll pull up like a frequency analyzer. I've got one built right into the template, and go to an area where there's an S, see what pops up on the frequency analyzer, put that in your de-esser, and then just set the slider so that it's only catching the S's. You don't want to be doing like 12, 16 dB of reduction on S's, because it's going to catch your other parts of the performance, just like the regular singing, and it's going to start to sound weird. So you just want like...
Do you use the stock de-esser?
3 dBs. I use the Waves one, but...
Okay, so it allows you to punch in like individual, like it's multi-band sort of thing, as opposed to just like, oh, cut out the highs.
Well, you can set what frequency it's targeting.
Oh, okay, that's
cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's I guess it's a multi-band compressor in a sense. It's more like a dynamic EQ, I guess. It's like a de-esser is going to take whatever frequency you tell it and compress only there in the frequency spectrum and leave everything else alone, right? So usually it's like 5600 is a good general. 5500, like 5.5K. That's usually where the S's live. But if if there's certain mics will amplify certain frequencies, like some of the more like high-end condenser mics I find, and if it's a female voice too, I find the S's can live like as high as like 8.9K or like even like somewhere up there too. So you just use a frequency analyzer. It's super easy. And then I'll use a second de-esser. This is a trick that I saw on a Billy Decker video. Billy Decker and a mixer from down in Nashville. For singers who, when they really go for a belty note and you're just like, oh, like it sounds like they're yelling at you. Do you know that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Like, yeah. And we all have that potential in our voice, right? It's just when you really go for it, you get that little extra bit of edge, and sometimes it's too much, right? And it just, I don't know how to explain it other than I'm listening to the song, and when they go for that note, I'm just like, oh, I just get a twinge, you know? And it's no fault of the singer. It's just, that's just what happens with your voice, right? So put a de-esser at 2K, very low. So that's not going to catch S's. It's going to catch that abrasiveness and my voice has. I use it on my voice all the time. My voice can get abrasive when I'm going for it. And so that'll just dip that frequency by like 3 dB when the singer's really going for it. It's so nice.
Like it dips just that frequency, because the funny thing is I've been using the stock de-esser on Pro Tools, and the only way that it works is that it's like everything above that. So if I set it to 2K, everything above 2K will be.
Oh, that's
Isn't that crazy?
rough. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, get yourself a different de-esser, I
Proper
guess.
DS.
Yeah. Waves one's pretty good. I don't know. There's some crazy ones out there that are like forward looking and super high tech and stuff, but the Waves one has been working okay for me.
I do like forward thinking.
So yeah, and then it's compression time after that. API 2500, just smashing the crap out of most vocals, like 12 to 24 dBs compression with that.
Yeah.
And the only trouble you'll get into by hammering vocals that hard is the breaths can sometimes start to be really accentuated, because you're turning down the volume of, you know, pretty much every note they're singing by compressing. So then when they go for the breath, it's like it's super loud now, right? Because you've equalized the volume of the vocal so much. So then sometimes I'll need to go in after the fact in automation and just take those breaths down. But I just really like the sound of that compressor, and I like to really drill the vocal with it. And then I'll put the RVox compressor after that, very lightly. I think it was Chris Lord-Alge on a video say like you need your like main compressor. You need your main compressor that's doing like the heavy lifting, and then you need your finisher compressor, which is just doing like a little bit just after that. So one working really hard and one not working so hard. And I use the RVox from Waves because it's got kind of a built-in presence function to it where it kind of hypes the good parts of the voice, and then also does a little bit of compression as well. So that'll be doing like 3 dB. And that's the vocal chain. And then sometimes a little bit of distortion after that too, actually. Pro Tools Lo-Fi, that Lo-Fi plugin, the stock.
Yes.
It's put like
free stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
0.3 of distortion on that is nice. It adds a little bit of like breakup to the voice in a pleasant way for me. And then if it's a rock track, I've sometimes turned that up to like 1.5 to actually get some edge so that the voice blends in better with like heavy guitars and stuff. A distortion on vocals can be really sweet. So experiment with it. It's great. So that was a long explanation, but I think the vocals deserve it because they're the most important part.
Yes.
And once I've got that vocal chain working, then the track like sounds done all of a sudden. It's like, wow, this sounds, and I haven't even touched the instruments yet, but they're roughly balanced and the vocal sounds good. And it's like, man, this is really coming together. And then from there, it gets a lot easier. So step 5 is lead vocal effects. I'll send the vocal to a stereo delay that's very quick. It'll be like a 30 and 60 millisecond delay on either side, and that just gives it some width in the stereo field.
Sure.
I'll send it to a reverb, and I'll send it to a quarter note delay, and the quarter note delay is going to be very quiet or off in the verses, and it'll be up in the choruses, just to give the vocal some extra length. And then if we need any like special effects, we'll do those
You'll
later.
go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But typically I've got a main reverb, a little spread. I call it the spread, just the little delay, and then the quarter note delay is usually where we start, and then you got a rockin' vocal, man. And then from there it's just instruments. So step 6 is drums. Without going into too much detail, all the drums are pretty much the same. The kick drum is the place where I'll be looking for those build-up frequencies and take them out.
Yeah, and cutting aggressively.
So like 150 to 200, again, like 200, 300 area. There's usually 2 to 3 frequencies between 150 and 3 that are kind of boom, not really what I would consider to be part of the kick drum sound that you want to hear. And you kind of got to use your judgment a little bit, but you'll hear them flaring up and then you just notch them down. 6 to 12 dB of reduction there.
Especially too.
What's that?
If you sweep through especially as well, you'll hear them.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and then just like a gentle cut around 250 or 300 of like, depending on, again, if these were done in a nice studio and they may have already had it running through an EQ, they may have already done the cuts, but if it's flat, you're recording at home maybe, or recording in a studio where they didn't do, a bunch of sweet outboard gear stuff, you just dip gentle wide open kind of Q at like 250 to 300 hertz, down by like 3 to 6 dB, depending on how much you want to sculpt that kick drum sound. And then if there's a kick out mic, that would be for the kick in mic. If there's a kick out mic, I'll sometimes just cut all the like low pass, everything down to like 100 hertz just to get the boom, 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 get that sub information.
Yeah.
If it's like a FET mic or something that sounds really sweet, then you might want to actually use some of that stuff. And in that case, I would just probably duplicate the settings on the kick in to the kick out. Just make it super easy. Just drag them over. And a little bit of compression, a little bit of EQ, adding like, 100 hertz and like 5K. 4 or 5K for the slap.
And that's just to add, the 100 hertz is just to add like fullness, I guess, or
thump. Yeah.
Yeah.
I use the Sheps EQ from Waves, which has like just a kick drum preset I pulled up where they do this like thing where they boost 50 hertz and then also high pass, and it creates this resonant bump. It's some technical thing from like the old 1073 EQs, but whatever.
Yeah, that somebody figured out, and then now everybody does it.
Yeah. So again, I just pulled up a preset and it did it all for me. So, and then snare drum, I'll have it going to again, I'll just use a snare preset EQ from SSL or Sheps 73 or whatever. It sounds good. Little bit of compression, really not that much. Really like 2 to 3 dBs of snare compression. And
really?
Yeah, you don't want to hit the drums too hard because that's when you end up with that like kind of boo, boo, kind of like you lose that snap. I don't know if that makes sense, but like you can hear
I know what you mean.
Or the drums almost sound like they're kind of like sucking in and out or something on the record. That's when they've been compressed too hard. You don't really want to hit them very hard at all, if at all. And then I'll send it to a sample on an aux track as well, if it needs it. And if it doesn't, then I'll just oftentimes send it to a sampled, just the reverb of a snare. So the sample will just be like, or whatever. And that way you get the reverb sound, but you don't get the bleed of the cymbals into the snare mic and whatever else, right?
Yeah.
And then some distortion, actually on the kick and the snare. Lo-fi, man, 0.7 distortion.
Lo-fi's your boy.
And then the toms, you're gonna usually cut them so that you don't have to put a gate on them. Each individual tom hit, I'll edit.
Yeah.
Little bit of EQ, and again, reverb samples on them if we want a little bit of size. And then overheads, pretty basic. I'll usually high pass the overheads up to 300, 400, 500 hertz. Just get rid of any potential for like phasey weirdness between the low end of the snare and the kick drum and stuff. And then, yeah, notch out those high frequencies, 4K, 2.5K sometimes. You just got to sweep around, boost your frequency, sweep around, just listen for that just awful stuff. Just cut that down. And then sometimes I'll do an actual low pass around, 16K or whatever, or even 14K.
It seems with the drums, a lot of it is just cleaning up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just
to,
cutting away some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And brutal frequencies. And then we'll have the parallel bus going on, which parallel compression. So you send the kick, snare, and toms to another aux track that's going to be playing in conjunction with the drums that are already there. I'll stick like an unlinked API 2500 stereo compressor on there, and not too much crazy compression, but like maybe 3 to 6 dBs, and that's going to add some thickness to the snare and the kick without really like noticeably compressing them, and the toms as well.
Yeah,
and it
so
adds
you
some
don't get
loudness.
The thing you were talking about before.
Yeah.
The weird sound.
And generally, you don't want to send the cymbals to that because it'll just get crazy.
Well, also too, that's another one of those things like you were saying with the high pass thing, where it's like, oh, I high pass to 50, so there's no frequencies below 50. You're cutting out the frequencies below 50, and then you boost 50 and below, and it's like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But it's like it's something that they figured out that does nice
works
stuff
for some
to
reason.
Drums,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not uncommon to have a parallel compression situation. And if you're curious about how that works, there's lots of videos to show you. Of course, the 10-step mix video series, I show in depth of how that works. And then, from drums, it's just the rest of the instruments at that point. So bass and guitars and keys and stuff like that. And really, there's not too much to be done to those instruments. Maybe a little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression on bass. Guitars generally like API 550 EQs with like maybe a little bit of 7K.
To watch out for on bass?
Sorry, say that again?
What are some things to watch out for on bass? Because I have a few with electric guitar, but with bass, it's like, too much bass, getting rid of certain stuff. Like, is there stuff that you generally would get rid of, or does it depend on the part that the bassist is playing? Or
I would try not to do too much on bass.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. I mean,
hopefully it's recorded well.
Usually it is, because usually people just use DI bass.
Direct in.
Most of the time, like, I see a lot of videos where there's a bass amp was recorded, and Andrew Sheps or whoever's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna use the DI because it sounds better. So usually the DI is going to be the choice signal. It's going to be clean. You can put a little distortion on it if you want to, but usually I would just...
You throw an AM sim on there, though, obviously, yeah.
No,
really?
No, just direct.
Just direct in.
Yep.
Wow.
Direct bass, baby.
Did not know.
Sounds great. You could. I mean, I just find that all that stuff just kind of adds weird harmonics and...
Sure.
I mean, it depends. If you're really going for a specific tone, then maybe. But for most stuff, just DI, man. And like roll off a little bit of low end, roll off some top end too. Like you can low pass it down to 6K or 5K if you don't need any of that top end of the bass, if you just want the thickness of it. But if you want to hear the attack of the pick maybe, or the strings a little bit more, then you just leave it alone. A little bit of compression. Maybe I've used the Max Bass plugin from Waves just to give it some like extra low end, but that can get a little weird too. So honestly, with bass, I just compress it a little bit and that's it.
Good to go.
Yeah.
Mark always gets like super appropriate tones too. With electric guitar, I feel like electric guitar is one of those ones. I mean, you're a big fan of the direct and electric guitar, and so am I. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the things to watch out for with electric guitar are like too much bass, like especially if it's not properly recorded. Like if you just stick an SM57 dead center of the amp, and the amp, like the settings are too bassy, like the person leaves the bass too high on the actual like amp, it can get pretty muddy. Mm-hmm. And then also too much treble. You know, especially if you stick it right in the center of the cone, it's like going to be treble city. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess you have to EQ that. But direct in is the jam.
Yeah, high passing and low passing is a great thing to do,
Yeah.
generally speaking, on the elements around the vocal. You can high pass the vocal too up to like 80 or whatever, so that there's no rumble from those frequencies that you don't need to hear. But like other instruments like guitars, like high pass them, like cut away everything up to 100. What frequencies down there do you need from a guitar? You don't. That's where the kick drum's going to live, and this is where, when you're listening to things all together and not soloing things, as you start to cut away low end from the instruments that don't need it, all of a sudden you're like, wow, I can really hear the kick drum and the bass now, because the guitars
sound more pro.
Yeah, the guitars aren't resonating and muddying up those low. The guitars are sticking to what the guitars do best, which is 100 to 5K or whatever, just the meat.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'll maybe boost like a little bit of 7K on an API 550 EQ, but then also low pass, like cut away the top end so that you don't have all that fizz if you've got a guitar tone that's super like.
That was my mistake with my
off.
Helix patches. I brought it down to 8, but I was looking online. People say for some of their patches they bring it all the way down to 3 for live.
Wow. Yeah.
Now I don't know if that's a recording context, but like probably not. But they bring it down to 3. Not like they said 5 or 3. I don't think I would do that for recording though, because that seems like.
I mean, I've gone down pretty far with you'll start to really hear it, right? But the thing about high passing and low passing is like just drag it, drag the controls or whatever, and just be like, I can't really tell a difference yet. Oh, now I kind of hear the tone changing. All right, I'll go back a little bit. Yeah. And then it's like, now you've cut away all these frequencies that you didn't. They're not affecting the core sound of the element. And what you're doing is you're freeing up all this headroom for the other instruments that need to occupy that space. So don't be afraid to high and low pass, baby. It's so good. And then for other instruments, like again, I'm gonna be super unexciting here, but like for acoustic guitar, SSL EQ, pull up a preset, acoustic guitar preset. Does it sound good? Sweet. I've been experimenting with like more compression on acoustics.
On acoustic?
I'm kind of digging how that sounds. So don't be afraid to.
I wonder.
Hit with some
a tough
compression.
one for me. Every time I've recorded acoustic, I've just been like, this can only serve one purpose. It can only be like quiet and rhythmic. But if it was like, the acoustic is like driving the chorus or something, or not driving the chorus, but driving the verse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think I need to record it differently.
Recording
not as bright mic.
Recording an acoustic is a tough thing. You need to have a good room and a good microphone and a good guitar and a good. There's a lot that goes into it. Yeah. So hopefully, it was done at a good studio or whatever. But for mine, I use the Neumann TLM 103, kind of around the 12th fret, not too close. So that you get a little bit of like natural compression, and so far as like the air in between the instrument and the mic actually compresses the volume of the track of the song a little bit.
So you're not using the it's not NT5s. What are the pencil condensers?
Yes.
Do you use those sometimes if it's just meant to be like high stuff?
Those are great for any purpose acoustic. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, those are great mics. I don't own them, but if I did, I would probably use them. Yeah.
I don't.
One thing I don't do is like the stereo pair, where like one's at the 12th fret and like one's like over your ear or somewhere else. I just like And honestly, like when I get tracks that have been recorded that way, I usually pick one mic and mute the other one and just
go from there.
Because it's just simpler and easier. But there would be applications where you would really want to do that, like for a solo acoustic guitar piece to get some sense of space. But for pop and stuff, it just around the 12th fret. Don't point it too much at the sound hole, otherwise you're going to get a lot of, so there's a little bit of trial and error. I've had some situations where like the 7th fret was the right place, sounded better there. So you can record a
Yeah.
pass, listen back to it, try a different position, try 3, 4, 5 different mic positions, pick your favorite one, and go from there. At
It's a
least,
good habit to get into, right?
yeah, like at
the
least,
engineering, especially if you're recording it itself, is just as important as the mixing,
especially
if not
for
more important.
acoustic, or like you said, if you're recording a guitar amp and you're, play with that mic position. If it's in the center of the cone, that might be too harsh. Move it to the side a little bit.
Yep.
But do a little bit of
fixing it in the mix. It's not really
it's harder
advisable.
it's a lot harder to solve that problem later than it is to just do 3 passes of the chorus with different mic positions and choose your favorite one. That's easier than later being like, this sounds like garbage and now I have to fix this. I
have to reset up all my gear and then re-record it.
Or like EQ this for an hour to try to like find the best way to minimalize how bad this sounds.
And it never ends up like, it's never as good as if you just moved the mic.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do a little bit of due diligence. Don't just be like, I think it goes here and go for it. Like take 5 minutes to do a couple test runs of just the chorus and see what works. So, and then all the instruments are going to a little bit of reverb, or at least there's an option for that. Just like a stereo reverb, very light amount.
And they're all going to the same one?
Yep. They all just go to the same channel, aux channel, and I can control individually, instrument to instrument, which ones are going and how much. And then they're all also going to, I think it's an 1/8 note delay or a 1/4 note delay. It'll vary song to song. And again, it's like electric guitars like that a little bit. It gives them a little bit of length and life and
is that band wide?
Yep.
So it's like a eighth note delay,
eighth note or a
wide,
1/4
just
note.
really quiet.
Yeah, and it's super quiet. It's not something you really notice. And then again, you can choose to send certain instruments more or less, or not at all. Like acoustics probably don't go.
That's more like an enhancement.
Yeah, it's not an effect per se. It's more.
I feel like a lot of this stuff in everybody's template, but your template, you can divide into like, this is cleaning up, and like this is enhancement.
Yeah. Yeah.
So neat. That's neat.
And then one thing we didn't talk about before was VCA faders, but those are in the template as well. And for folks listening, you can download my template. It's all at the 10 Step Mix video series. You can download the template for yourself. Excuse me. But VCA faders allow you to control groups of tracks at one time with a fader. So you can solo them all. You can mute them all. You can turn them up and down with a fader. So it's a little bit nicer than
organization thing.
a little bit nicer than groups. Groups are a little bit.
I was willing
cumbersome
to
for
pay
me.
$100 so that I could use VCAs.
Yeah.
But
did you end up doing it?
The way the Pro Tools works now, they just can't.
Oh yeah.
You can't update it because they want your money subscription.
Right. Yeah, that's too bad. But anyway, so all VCA group the drums, all the instruments are just one, because I can't be bothered to think about. Once I get the internal balance, I just maybe want to push up the instruments a little bit or down a little bit.
Yeah.
I haven't found it useful to group instruments separately. I found it more useful to group them all at once. Lead vocal gets its own VCA, so that if you have a doubled lead vocal, you can move them together. But also, once you do your automation and you've got little words up and down on your vocal,
yes,
you can't move that fader anymore because it snaps back to the automation that you've created. So you either have to go into your edit mode, turn on your trim tool, blah, 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 blah. That's too complicated. I'll just take the VCA fader for the vocal, move that up and down. So that's now my master control for the vocal. Automation all stays untouched. That's nice. And then the backgrounds get their own VCA. And the backgrounds just, I'll just usually copy the lead vocal plugins right over to the backgrounds. Maybe adjust the frequency build-up cuts if we need to, and send them to reverb, and we're done. So that's it. And then automation, I guess, is your last step. So that's where you're going through. Maybe you've got a solo boost somewhere, or whatever for effect, or maybe you've got title music. I'll just mute that.
Perfect.
Oh, no.
We're cut off.
Almost perfect timing. So maybe you've got. So I'm just gonna make a note of that to cut that out later. Okay. So that was 89. That was almost 90 minutes actually. I'm gonna put 90 minutes. instruments. So maybe you've got a solo boost that you need to ride up, or maybe you've got a drum fill you want to ride up or whatever. Most of my automation comes on the vocals, though. That's where we're just like the little words, like the, it, all those
Vocal
tiny little
ridings.
Yeah, just ride those up. Just select that area and just, go, you got to go to your volume automation mode or whatever, and just push those words up. And then the ends of words where it's trailing off, I like to slowly kind of ride those up as well, so that as the vocalist gets quieter, it feels like they're closer to you. So you still get the impact of them singing more quietly, but it doesn't get buried by the band.
Do you write anything else?
Typically not that much. Again, like a guitar solo or maybe the odd drum fill.
Automation is one of those ones I was saying earlier that they don't really give you, like, the internet has been good about sharing information now and being like, yeah, you have lots of things that you can, like, look up for recording and learn online. I haven't been able to find anybody's automation moves, stuff like, just like panning, changing and stuff like that, and stuff where people are like, this is what I like to do when this happens, it's just not a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that probably the truth of the matter is that, like, not a lot of people are doing it, and because it's kind of cumbersome and it takes a long time, and it's a lot easier to just be like, slap this plugin on your kick drum and it'll sound great. Give me lots of views. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it is a little bit
sexier too.
Yeah, exactly. Vocal automation is kind of boring, but I think it's very important. And
it's night and day.
And definitely check out the video of ours on YouTube where I go through how to do that. I saw on Mix with the Masters, the mixing engineer, I can't remember his name, but for a Cardi B track, and what this person will do is they'll take her lead vocal and ride every single word up or down or whatever, just to make it hit exactly the way they want. And then as the track goes through, as he goes through the mixing process, it's like, okay, now I actually need to ride this differently or that differently. So what he does is he sends that vocal track to an aux track, just so that he has a fresh volume control over it. And now
he rides it there,
and then rides it again, and then again. So this vocal track was going to like three. It was going through 3 aux tracks by the end of it or something, and all of them had rides in specific words, specific spots, just to get the vocal to be present and poke out.
It really makes a difference. I didn't do a voiceover. I mixed a voiceover like before this all started, and like the guy had great tone of voice. I compressed it. I did everything. Like the mix sounded great, and as soon as I like actually got to like do the vocal writing, it was like, oh, this actually sounds like a real advertisement. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It doesn't just sound like some guy recorded his voice.
And you just can't get that from plugins.
No.
Like, compressing is the sort of automatic go-to way to achieve, the evenness in volume from word to word, note to note. And you're going to get, it makes it sound really cool and the tone is great. And of course we're going to do that, but you're never going to be able to get the level of detail from just compressing alone. You have to compress and then go in and ride the volume on every single word. And it takes it's a little bit involved and it takes some time, but it's totally worth it. And it doesn't take, once you get good at it, it doesn't take that long, but it's going to be a half hour of
when AI gets better.
Yeah, there's like plugins. There are plugins like the Waves Vocal Rider plugin, but I didn't find that it worked the way I wanted.
Doubts.
So, go in there, grab the little words, bring them up. Usually I'll bring the whole chorus might come up. The entire vocal comes up a dB for the chorus so that it sits on top of the band. If a bunch of instruments got added at that point, comes a little bit down for the verse. And so, once you get the hang of it, it's not too tricky, but that is I think a piece of work that I'm willing to actually spend everything else I want to be like as quick as possible.
Quick as possible.
But that is, I'm willing to spend a half hour writing a vocal. It's worth it.
Do you do the vocal writing in your 10-step thing, right? Like
Yep.
you show how to do it, right?
Yep.
Because I'm pretty sure I learned it like better from there. And I did that mix after that, and it was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
This is what I've been missing.
Yeah, man. That's yeah, I mean, it's all in that video, and that's just stuff I've learned from watching other people's videos or experimentation on my own, but I think it makes a huge difference. Yeah. And then usually once that's done, I can take my vocal VCA and actually turn the vocal down maybe half a dB or dB from where I had it, because now the little words aren't getting buried anymore, and it actually sits in the track quite nicely. So
yeah. Shit.
So that's pretty much it. And then because of the way Pro Tools works, you've got your mix bus happening. You can just sort of select the entire area of the song along that mix bus track, right click the mix bus track, say commit, and it'll render your entire track through your mix bus, and you'll have a stereo mix.
That's crazy, man.
Export
See, I can't
that
do that
and send it
because I
away.
didn't get 11.
Yeah,
Son
if you
of a
don't
bitch.
have that,
So, I
then
mean-
you have to set up an audio track, send your mix bus to that, hit record, press play, and it'll literally record your mix to a stereo track, which is how they did it in the old days of tape and stuff. And it doesn't take that much longer.
So
but,
I mean, to sum it up, like the you start off with your template. Your template is just so it's consistent. It has all your plugins in it, but you mute the plugins, and then you get a rough balance from there, just with the faders in terms of volume. And that's usually what I feel like people get sent home after they do a day of recording. It's like, oh, I'll send you like a rough, mix home.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that sounds pretty good. You get it as good as you can there. You're not soloing anything. Then you're sort of adding on that mix bus. The mix bus is sort of everything. The mix bus is like that last step before it hits your ears, at least in terms of what you have control of. And you're just doing a few like sort of almost enhancing things on the mix bus.
in a
not
macro
really doing a lot of
sense,
cleaning up.
we're processing the track as a whole. But first, before we get into the nitty gritty of individual instruments, a bit of a time saver.
Yeah. And then the lead vocals, you're doing a little bit of cleaning up, a little bit of enhancing. Lead vocal effects is there's a lot of like enhancing, like almost you wouldn't notice it, directly, but there's a little bit of reverb, which you would notice, and then like delays and all that stuff. And then drums, you're really not doing that much. It's mostly cleanup. And then and
parallel
you're
compression.
using a lot of presets. You're not like, you're using presets and then adjusting them from there. It's like, oh, what is this thing doing? That's what I do a lot as well. It's like, okay, they're saying I should boost this 100 here. Let me really jack it up so I can hear what it's doing, and then I sort of put it into taste. And then bass, you don't touch it all. You do direct in. Generally, that's good to know, because I've put on the amp things and been like, I know I'm supposed to do this.
A little bit of compression, a little bit of roll off on the lows. That should do it for you. Yeah.
And then with like electric guitars, you were doing. You said you weren't doing a lot as well too, and that's sort of assuming that they're, engineered right. You're like a big fan of direct, as I am.
Yeah, man, just roll off some low end, roll off some top end if it's too fizzy, and maybe add an EQ, like an analog EQ. Don't even do too much with the EQ. It's just having it on there is going to give it a little bit of love,
Yeah. Well, also too, another thing that you'd mentioned is the you do kind of the thing you do with the vocal to the guitars as well too. You send them to that sometimes that eighth note panned wide delay, but just barely have it in there.
Yep.
That's sometimes nice. And then the background vocals are like you pretty much copy and paste the same stuff as the other one.
As the lead, once the lead's done, especially if it's the same singer.
Yeah. And then the very last step, I guess, is the vocal. Do you do the vocal writing very last?
Yeah, I'll do that after I've gotten the instruments where
really
they're going to be. Yeah.
Take it to the next level.
But maybe I should.
really
maybe I
does.
should do that first. I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe
These are things to think about. But
change the steps.
I mean, it's cool to have the order of priorities. I think it's, if you were mixing for 10 years, you would have came to this conclusion. It's just because, I guess you have been kind of mixing for almost that long. But like, it's just good to have a system to have
not professionally
consistency.
though, God.
Yeah, you got to be. Well, it's true.
Yeah.
But I think that this is a good idea. Like as soon as I did this approach, because I've just been kind of mixing by my my instincts when I first started and did all my film score stuff, and it went pretty well, but it was long. Mixes would take me like 9-10 hours a song, which is stupid. But as soon as I did this, it was very consistent. So
Oh yeah, I
pretty
mean,
damn cool.
there's nothing better than like getting a mix done in 1 or 2 hours and feeling like it's good. And there's nothing
Yes.
worse than spending 8 hours on a mix and being like, I don't know if any of this is good.
And I don't know if the mix at 5 hours was better than this one at 7 hours.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Oh, yeah.
that's scary.
Yeah.
So
So
this is a good way to avoid that.
yeah, and I think like one thing maybe I mean we talked about a lot of plugins and a lot of different treatments, but I think I do want to take a minimalist approach in some ways, and we did touch on this a little bit, but like if you're really jacking up a ton of one frequency or cutting a ton of one frequency,
Yeah.
that's always an indication to me that I'm getting potentially lost. Maybe that's the right move, but
Yeah.
oftentimes it's
I
like,
feel like
okay,
if it's for a creative reason, like, oh, I'm gonna make this really
Yeah,
weird
yeah.
sounding. But if it's like, oh man, this guitar needs to be fuller, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna fucking boost the low mids like a ton.
Yeah.
I always find myself like, oh, I'm just gonna like really like cut out like 3 and 4K and like, guitars or some nonsense like that. And like I really cut it out, and then it's like maybe it does sound good, but I'm soloing. The soloing is the thing to avoid.
Yeah, and just
Mixers talk about
try not
soloing like
to
it's a fucking drug.
get too far away from what you started with in terms of the initial tracks, right? Like unless there was a really big problem in the recording process of that track, in which case maybe just re-record it. But like, try not to do too much to get away from that and that's part of why starting with that rough balance is so good, is because it shows you, okay, this song can sound pretty good even without nothing on it. And then it's just how do I take it to that next level without really wrecking anything, because we've already got some good parts there. Yeah.
And it shows you also what it's like meant to be. I feel like if you're getting a rough balance with your guitar and you're like, oh, I really want it to be full sounding, it's like, but whenever I turn it up to make it full sounding, it sounds way too shrill or way too thin. I'm gonna have to boost a bunch of the EQ. It's like, well, either you're gonna have to re-record it to do that, or you're gonna have to have it fulfill like a different role.
Yeah. And then another thing that I'm trying to train myself to do a little bit better, and this is sort of touching on what you're saying too, is like reach for the fader before you reach for the plugin.
Yeah.
Like just
I'm
turn
guilty.
it down if it's like, oh, this is hitting me too hard, or it's too bright, or it's like just try turning it down a little bit before you open up an EQ and start
Or compressor.
messing with the shape of the sound or the compressor, whatever. It's like, just, the vocal's not present enough. Just turn it up a little bit. Like maybe don't open up your plugins. If you can fix it with the fader, man, like that's ideal. And I think
Also, too, it's always just gonna be better.
I think so. And I think we're very quick to like, well, I got all these cool tools, I'm just going to use those. It's like, maybe just turn it. And that's where that automation comes as well. It's like, there's a lot of mixers who swear by automation. They're like, I don't want to use any plugins if I can avoid it. I'm just going to automate everything. And like, that's not how I've been working, but there's some great engineers
I
who
would love
just
to know more.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about what they're saying, because a lot of people are like, the more movement, the better. I'm like, what movement, man? Like, fucking tell me.
Yeah.
Don't just say that.
Yeah. It's very cryptic, but but when you hear what it can do to a vocal, right, it makes sense that maybe other instruments would benefit from that too, like riding up and down, a drum fill going into a chorus or something is a easy thing to do there. So look for more ways to use the faders and the pan pots, because those are your bread and butter, man. But anyways,
or hire a dope mix engineer,
or just hire a dope mix engineer. So that's our 10-step process, and a little bit of an update of how that works. So you can check out all the videos on our YouTube page. Leave us questions. We'd love to talk about this kind of stuff. We would love to answer your question as the question of the week as well. And if you have a song you want to send to us,
yes,
send it to us. Do you have anything else you want to say before we wrap here, Mike?
I want to be a big ship with a small penis. Is the quote of the fucking week.
Check us out on social media, musicguypodcast.com, YouTube, Facebook. I'm on Instagram, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, at AlRoMusic. Michael Hebbs is at Bruno the Meek on Instagram and at michaelhebbs.net. Support the show.
Me a Whippy. I'm so lonely.
Yeah, someone go hang out with them in Whippy. Yeah, I'll come. We'll get a hang going soon.
We should.
Yeah.
I want to do one of these in person, just for
I know, man,
times.
just for old time's sake.
Yeah.
Support the show by telling your friends about it and just contacting us. Send us questions. Send us songs. Comment on stuff. All that stuff is super helpful. And we love you guys. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Happy mixing. Happy social distancing. Bye for now.